Hello, and welcome to another lesson from Level Up Mathematics. In today's lesson, we will be exploring multiplying and dividing integers. So when you're multiplying or dividing integers, there's two things that can happen. Case one, if you have the same signs, your product or your quotient will be positive. So if you have a positive times a positive, you get a positive. If you have a negative times a negative, you get a positive. When the signs are the same, you always end up with a positive number. Now, if you're dividing, same thing is true. A positive divided by a positive is also a positive, and a negative divided by a negative is also positive. So remember, same signs, your answer is going to be positive. Now, if you have different signs, your answer will always be negative. And there's one addition I'd like to make to this rule, is that sometimes you'll have like multiple numbers that you're multiplying. So in this example, we have a -2 times -3 times -5 times -10. There are four numbers that you're multiplying, and that's an even number of negative signs. 4 is even. So when you have an even number of negatives, that will always give you a positive. If you have an odd number of negative signs, like in this next one, we have 1, 2, we have 3 negatives, and 3 is an odd number. If you have an odd number of negatives, your answer will be negative. We'll talk more about that in just a moment. So let's start with example 1. Find each of the following products. -8 times 5. Well, I know 8 times 5 is 40. And because the signs were different, I know my answer is -40. You could also say that because you have one negative and one is an odd number, your answer would be negative. Okay? In problem B, I have 10 times -15. Well, I know 10 times +15 is 150, but because the signs were different, I know my answer is negative. All right, in problem C, we have a negative times a negative. And when the signs are the same, our answer is always positive. So 9 times 7, this would be positive 63. All right. In problem D, we have 6 times -2 times 4. So I know here that I have one negative number, and that's an odd number. So I know my answer will be negative. So let me write that down. Answer will be a negative number. All right. So if I multiply these numbers, now remember, you can multiply these numbers in any order you want to. So I'll just multiply the 6 and the 4 together first, and that would be 24 times -2, and that would be -48. All right. In problem E, I have 2 negatives. And 2 is an even number, so I know this answer is going to be a positive number. So I'm going to multiply these. Again, you can multiply them in any order. So I'll do 8 times 3 is 24, and then times 2, and that would be positive 48. All right, in problem F, let's count up how many negatives we have. We have a negative 1, 2, 3 negatives. 3 is an odd number, so I know my answer will be negative. 3 is an odd number, so I know my answer is going to be negative. Now, I can, I can multiply these in any order that I want to. So I'll just start with the -5 times 6, and that would give me -30. And then we have times -2 times -10. Then I'll multiply the -30 times -2, and that would be positive 60 times -10. And then 60 times 10 is 600. And because the signs are different, I know my answer is -600. All right. Now, let's talk about exponents for a minute. Recall that exponents represent repeated multiplication. For example, 5 to the third power, or 5 cubed, is 5 times 5 times 5, which is 125. Exponents work the same way with negatives. For example, if you have -2 quantity cubed, that means -2 times -2 times -2, which is -8. So in example 2, it says evaluate each of the following. And we have -6 quantity squared. Now I want you to notice that -6 is inside the parenthesis. So that simply means we're multiplying -6 times -6. And a negative times a negative is a positive. All right, in problem B, I want you to notice the negative is not inside the parentheses. So this is literally negative, and then inside the parentheses, I'm going to put 6 times 6. Because the exponent 2 is on positive 6. Okay, so this would be -36. So our final answer here is -36. So take a minute and just look at the difference between problems A and problems B. It's going to be very important in later grades that you understand the difference between those two expressions. All right, problem C, we have -3 to the third power. So that's the same thing because the -3 is inside the parentheses, is -3 times -3 times -3. So this would be -3 times -3 is +9 times -3, which would be -27. All right, problem D, -10 to the third power would be -10 times -10 times -10. Well, -10 times -10, and negative times a negative is a +100 times -10, and that would simply be -1000. All right, problem E, we have -2 raised to the fourth power. So -2 times -2 times -2 times -2. So I'm going to multiply -2 times -2 together to get 4. Then I'm going to multiply -2 times -2 to get 4. So -2 times -2 times -2 is equal to 4, +4 times +4, which is 16. Remember, if you have an even number of negative signs, your final answer will be positive. Now, in problem F, we have -5 squared. I want you to notice there is no parenthesis here. So this is the same thing as negative parenthesis 5 times 5. So this would be -25. All right, example 3. Rewrite each division problem as a multiplication problem. So in problem A, I have 35 divided by -5 is equal to -7 because -5 times -7 is +35. Problem B, -24 divided by -3 is 8 because -3 times 8 is equal to -24. All right, pause the video and try problems C and D on your own. All right, welcome back. On problem C, -32 divided by 4 is equal to -8 because 4 times -8 is equal to -32. D, -18 divided by -9 is 2 because -9 times +2 is equal to -18. All right, example 4, find each quotient. In problem A, we have -25 divided by -5, and I know a negative divided by a negative is a positive, so this would simply be +5. Problem B, -45 divided by 9. Well, I know 45 divided by 9 is 5, but because the signs were different, I know my answer is -5. All right. 23 divided by -23. Well, 23 divided by 23 is 1. But because the signs were different, I know my answer must be -1. All right, problem D. We have -22 times 2 divided by -4. So you want to do the numerator first. So -22 times 2 would be -44 divided by -4. Now you're going to work that out. So 44 divided by 4 is 11, and a negative divided by a negative is a positive. All right. In problem E, we have 2 times 3 times negative 6 divided by 3. So work the numerator first. So 2 times 3 is 6. 6 times negative 6 would be negative 36 divided by 3. Well, 36 divided by 3 is 12, but because the signs are different, I know my answer is negative 12. All right, problem F. Negative 2 times negative 3 times 4 times negative 5. So let's work out the top first. So negative 2 times negative 3 would be positive 6, and 4 times negative 5 would be negative 20. On the bottom, negative 6 times negative 2 would be positive 12. All right, let's simplify that a little more. 6 times negative 20 would be negative 120 divided by 12. Now, negative 120 divided by 12 is 10. And because the signs are different, I know my answer is negative 10. And that concludes today's lesson, multiplying and dividing integers.